Okay, so I'm going to start in 5, 4, 3. Hello, Neil McCarthy. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Hope from Home.
Great to be with you.
Listen, as the director for the communications for the Archdiocese of Toronto, I'm hoping that you can perhaps spread some light on a question that everybody's sort of wondering about, and that is, in particular, what the physical distancing policies might look like once the churches are open again.
Yeah, that's one of the big questions that everybody has, and obviously people want to get back to church as soon as possible, and we all want to get back to church as soon as possible. In terms of what it's going to look like for people when they come to church, yeah, it is going to feel a little bit different. It may feel a little awkward or uncomfortable, but this is kind of the new reality we're living in. So we can expect that there's going to be physical distancing guidelines anytime you come into a church. In the Archdiocese of Toronto, that'll mean 2 meters distance between people when you're interacting, in your seating. We're obviously going to have some seating for families. They can be from the same household in the same pew together, but you've got to be 2 meters from.
Oh, okay. What happened?
This. My hand.
That's okay.
And it's not a bathroom, it's just a closet, so. Yeah. Okay, no problem.
Okay, so shall we? Yeah, we'll start from the top again.
Sure.
Okay. All right. In 5, 4. Hello, Neil McCarthy. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Hope from Home.
Great to be with you.
Great. Listen, as the director of communications for the Archdiocese of Toronto, I'm hoping that you can perhaps spread some light on the question that everyone is thinking about at this point, and that is, in particular, what would physical distancing policies look like in the churches, once they're open again?
Well, sure. I mean, obviously, we'd like to get back as soon as possible. That's what we all want to be able to do. So we're waiting for that date and preparing accordingly. And yes, when people come back to church, there's definitely going to be physical distancing required. So essentially staying 2 meters from everyone, except for your own family members as you enter the church and you're part of the church celebrations. And so we'll have some spaces marked out, obviously, with the pews separated. It may be between rows, every other row or every other row, depending on the requirements that we land on. And also being able to sit with your own family, but then being distanced from your neighbors, that kind of thing. Lining up for communion, there's going to be physical distancing around that. And then when we're entering and departing the church as well, we have to be mindful of the fact that while we're accustomed to wanting to socialize and gather in the foyer or outside, we're not going to be able to do that for the time being.
Okay. Is there any ideas at this point, any dates maybe being tossed around as to when that might happen?
Yeah, the magic answer that everyone's looking for is the date. And I wish I could say, here is the date. So much of it is reliant on the medical authorities that we're taking advice from. Unfortunately, in the province of Ontario, we're seeing that the numbers are still quite high, and the chief medical officer wants to get below a certain number before they start loosening those restrictions. But what we are trying to do is prepare for the fact that when we do get the green light, we'll be ready to go. We can anticipate it will likely be a phased approach. So we're not going to be able to start with, full capacity of our churches as we had been accustomed to before the pandemic time. But we'll likely experience a time where it's gradually phased in. So that may start with churches being open for private prayer or just daily mass, and then eventually moving to a point where we can offer weekend masses. And we're seeing that in other jurisdictions that have already opened up, same sort of approach.
A question there is, do you think that it be possible, or there's a possibility of more masses happening? Because if there will be restricting the amount of people going into the church, that means not a lot of people will be able to get in. Will there be more masses planned rather than the usual 3 or 4 on a Sunday morning, maybe throughout the afternoon?
That's something definitely that parish by parish communities are looking at, depending on how large their congregations are. The other thing is, how comfortable are people going to be coming back right away? In other jurisdictions, some of the dioceses have seen the numbers being quite small. Others, it's been larger. So we're trying to kind of deal with both possibilities as well. And it's going to be a new experience for everyone. So whether we, have to have more masses, the other thing that we have to really consider is the amount of cleaning that needs to be done. So we're going to have to be cleaning surfaces probably between every Mass. Lots of volunteers. We're going to have cleaning ministries like we've never had before. So there's going to be the time that's required to get people in safely, get people out safely, to clean the church, and then start the next Mass. So all that's being taken into account as we prepare our plans for reopening.
Wow, that's fantastic. Are there any public safety metrics that need to be hit before the Cardinal decides to, open up the doors again?
Well, obviously, we're taking our cues from the chief medical health officers. So there's provincial medical officer, and there's also a municipal medical health officers too. And so they're the ones that are really driving, the size of the gatherings we can have when it's safe to do so. We're also meeting with provincial officials to make sure that kind of our protocols are the best practices in terms of what we need to do to foster a safe environment. So those are the kind of things we're looking at. So it's not as easy as, just saying the Cardinal, obviously saying, okay, we want to open the church. He would love to open the churches yesterday. But obviously we want to do it when it's safe and prudent to be able to do that. And we want to make sure that we have the health of our, faithful as our number one priority. And we've seen, unfortunately, in some parts of the world where gatherings of faith communities have been the sources of outbreak of the pandemic and further infection. And we don't want to do that where we have a second wave and go back 3 steps when we try to move forward. So that's part of the challenge as well, striking that balance and getting our churches open as soon as it's safe to do so.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. Now, Neil, being the Director of Communications for the Archdiocese, you must hear some incredible stories of hope and faith coming from the churches or coming from the parishes. Is there any in particular that you can share with us today?
Obviously, we didn't want to have to close the churches.
Oh,
Yep.
yes.
Yeah, you guys went frozen too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Start again? Yeah.
The last question.
Yeah, last question. Okay. Okay, you ready? In 5, 4, 3. So Neil, being the Director of Communications for the Archdiocese, you must come across some incredible stories of hope and faith. Is there any in particular that you can share with us today?
It's unfortunate. Obviously, no one wants to have the churches closed, but because of that reality, we've seen some amazing things that people have done in the community to reach out to those who are isolated. We have a parish out in the West End of Toronto that's reached out by telephone to more than 2,000 families, and just making that personal contact with them has been so important. I also think of places like the Good Shepherd Refuge where they're still serving hundreds of meals a day. They can't do it with a hot meal, but volunteers are going down and bringing bag lunches, hundreds of bag lunches every day to ensure that the homeless are still fed. And then we have stories of people priests who are visiting sick, individuals who are in long-term care facilities, may not be able to go into the facility, but are saying prayers through the window or saying the rosary over the phone. And so they're really inspiring. And through this challenging time that we're seeing, we're also seeing the best of people coming forward and reaching out to care and love and serve, just following the example of Jesus. So it really is beautiful in many ways.
Yeah, that's incredible. Listen, we're running out of time, but I do want to ask you one last question. What gives you hope personally during these times, Neil?
Well, I mean, as I said, it's faith in action. When we're asked to leave church every week, the idea is go and serve. And how can you announce the gospel? And how do we live that in tangible ways? And, I'm fortunate in my role that I get to see and hear about that. Try to do that in my own family, in my own community, to try to think of how we can reach people who may be alone or isolated during these difficult days. So that'd be a challenge that I would say for all of us to consider as we work and pray to get towards a time where we can gather again. How can we reach those who are isolated or marginalized?
Yeah. Neil, as always, it's a pleasure talking to you.
Hey, great to be with you. Have a great day.
Thank you so much for talking with us for the show.
Anytime.
Okay, bye-bye.